All right, so I think we can begin. Hey everyone, thank you for attending. My name is Artur Slontons, and today we will have a workshop on Zabbix reports. We'll be setting up, configuring, deploying scheduled reports, and we will also take the new visualization options in mind. So please use the chat for just general communication and use the Q&A to ask your questions. I myself will be answering them, maybe some of them during the workshop, some of them after, and I also have a colleague here that will assist me with the questions, right? The session should last approximately 40 minutes to an hour, but that depends on the questions and the pace that we do. As I have mentioned before, so for this session, we'll be working with Zabbix 6.0 LTS. So you will need a virtual machine or a container or a physical machine to follow the tasks that we are performing here. If not, then a recording of this will be available in a few days, essentially as soon as we get to it, maybe even tomorrow already. And it will be available on YouTube, and everyone will be able to follow the recording and do these tasks at their own pace. So it's up to you. If you wish to follow now, do so. If not, you can do it later. So before we begin, like I said, we'll be deploying and configuring reports. And also, I will have sort of the back end of this presentation focused on the new visualization capabilities. We have many new widgets, and we have a set of new functions and a new function syntax since Zabbix 5.4, if I'm not mistaken, that can be used to aggregate data in many new ways, right? And that can then be used in reports, which is really great and can add some additional functionality to reports. And generally, what I say is when you see new visualization options for Zabbix, especially if we're talking about dashboards, you also need to think about this in the context of reports, right? So everything that's available on dashboards will be available in reports. I have also prepared sort of a blank Gmail account, a dummy Gmail account that we'll be using to receive the reports. If everything goes right, you should see them there. If you're following this task, then once again, prepare some sort of an email account and an email server that you can use in Zabbix configuration. I'm using Gmail as a relay mail server. Okay, so let's begin. First, I'll go through the slides. I'll talk about what we're going to do, and then we're actually going to do this. So first things first, we're going to deploy and configure the Zabbix web service. So first off, we need to install Zabbix web service. This is actually the reporting service. It's a relatively new package. Whenever we released reporting, right, we added it. It's called Zabbix web service, but it's actually the reporting service. So don't be confused. This is not a mandatory package. It has nothing to do with front end. It has everything to do with reporting. It's a relatively new component. So we will install it. Then we will just take a look at the web service config. We won't be changing anything in it. We'll use the default port, but we'll just look at what's available. Once we have deployed it, we will also in the web service config file, just see where the log file is stored if we want to troubleshoot it. Then next up, we will specify the allowed IP address, the address of the Zabbix server that is allowed to connect to this here web service. We will use the default localhost one, but that depends on your environment because this web service can run either on the same machine or on a separate machine as the Zabbix server, completely up to you, right? And then we will also check the listen port. The default one is 10053. Works nicely for me. I'm going to use it. Once again, if you have some port restrictions, if there are some port conflicts, maybe 10053 is already taken, then you're free to change it. This is the port that the web service listens on. Once we will finish the configuration, we will enable the web service. Should start up quite easily without any issues. We can check the log file, then see if it started up successfully. Then we will install Chrome, right? I will use curl. I have my commands prepared here so as not to type them for too long. I'll copy paste them and then I'll let you follow them. But essentially when installing Chrome, you can just Google, type in Google Chrome download on Linux, and then you'll see a link and you can simply curl it like so, or use wget or whatever to download it and then install it. Supposedly, as per our documentation, Chromium also works, but that's sort of unofficial statement. It might work, it might not. So if you wish to try with Chromium, you may do so. So this needs to be deployed on the web report service server where the service is running. And this helps us generate, participates in the generation of the reports. All right, and after we have installed Chrome and web reporting service, we will continue with configuring the Zabbix server. But first, I think we can get to it. So let's go all the way back and let's start. So first things first, this is my workshop machine. I already have a Zabbix server on it, Zabbix frontend on it. I think I also have Zabbix agent running on it, all right? So all I need to do at this point is DNF install Zabbix web service. Yes, make sure that you have the Zabbix repository added. If you're running this web reporting service on the same machine as the Zabbix server or Zabbix frontend, then you will probably already have the Zabbix repository added, installed. But if it's a separate machine, then you'll have to install it. The instructions are on our download page, the very first command, installing the Zabbix repository. All right, so let's install the web service. So DNF install Zabbix web service, and then slash yes. Not slash, but dash yes. Right, it should be quick. It's a small package in comparison with everything else. Should be relatively quick. This is a small VM, not beefy at all. So it's a really lightweight service. We can see we have deployed it. I'll give you a minute or two just to follow up, deploy it, and after you have deployed it, let's see what's next. We can also access the config and then just take a look at the config, tweak it to your liking. So just a minute, I'll take a look at the Q&A section meanwhile. Do we have any questions? No questions so far. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A, right? That's no bother at all. Okay, let's see. So we have deployed the web service. We can see that the config file, before I started to look at the config file, is available in etc by default Zabbix web service.conf, right? We can open it. And here we have a couple of options. Some of them are very similar to the options that are available for every other Zabbix component. For example, log type, log file, right? Log file size, we can restrict that. Debug level, by default, we're running on 3. We'll take a look at how the log looks after we start this service. We'll start a bit later. Then list of allowed IP addresses. So this is important. My Zabbix server is located on this here machine, same as the reporting service. Therefore, I'm using the loopback address, the local host address. But if your Zabbix server is located somewhere else, you will need to either get rid of this or just add a Zabbix server address here. And then listening port 10053. We have a couple of timeouts for processing over here. Timeout is 3. And then we can also encrypt the connection with certificates over here at the bottom. So a bunch of certificate encryption parameters. And that's it. We will leave this as is. We have a question. Can we send utilization reports and link downtime data, service availability data from Zabbix to emails and download them in CSV? All right, so regarding CSV, currently the reports are sent in PDF. That'll be PDF. If we're talking about service availability, yes, we will look at that during the kind of back end of the practical task. I'll show you some examples of dashboards. Utilization reports also can be sent. We can use aggregate items to get, for example, weekly utilization reports or something like that, and then send, for example, a list of top 20 hosts by some sort of a CPU utilization or something else. So yes, that can be, nowadays that can be done. Yeah. Before that, I'd say before we added the new functions, it was a bit problematic, but now, as you'll see, I'll also show you the items that I'm using. It can be done quite simply. So thank you for the question, but yes, it's PDF, and you'll also see that in my examples. Okay, so we have taken a look at the Zabbix web service. All right, we can start it up now. So system control, enable Zabbix web service, enable and start it. System CTL, enable Zabbix web service. You're probably hearing my keyboard, but I think that's fine. And we have started it, and we can take a look at the log, var log Zabbix web service. Right, so looks fine. I had tested it previously, so it has previous sort of records. This is the old log file that I had, but we're right here right now. Right, we started it, no request, no nothing. So yeah, just started. That's what you get with the default debug level. Okay, I'll once again give you just a minute to catch up. It's been simple so far, and it's generally going to be simple throughout, but just so everyone catches up, before we install Google Chrome, right? So for Google Chrome, I have my link prepared. Feel free, once again, to type into Google, download Google Chrome on Linux, and you'll see the link to the package, and you just curl it, right? Curl, then the link, then -- output, and the output name. I'm gonna try and copy this over here. Let me see. Let me see if I'm able to copy the command. You'll see how it looks in the command line. I'm gonna switch to. Yes, should be available. Yeah, if we're talking about Chrome, I think Chrome is available on pretty much everything out there. Yeah, just have to look for a deb package. I'm using Oracle Linux right here, but reporting service is also available everywhere. Yeah, no problem whatsoever. You're just the instructions will be a bit different, right? But if you Google download Chrome on Ubuntu or Debian or any other Debian based system, I think the top result should pretty much be the same as it is for CentOS or Oracle Linux or anything like that. That wasn't it. Let me try and copy again. You can try with Chromium. Yeah. Okay, so I will be curling this. And yes, you can install directly from sources. To save some time, I'm installing from packages. You can install directly from source if you want to. I think instructions are also on the Google, on the very first result or the second result on how to install it from sources. Yeah, I'm just doing this to save some time. This isn't necessarily a how to compile Chrome tutorial. Why macros like date and time can be resolved when we specify in subject for email. We need to check in the documentation, and maybe my colleague can do this for me while I'm practicing doing the practical tasks, if they are actually supported in the subject. Maybe they're supported only in the message. Then we need a feature request to support them in the subject also. So yeah, question was why macros like date and time can be resolved when we specify in subject for email. Okay, so I'm in my TMP directory. I will curl the link and output Google Chrome stable current x86 64.rpm. Let's download it. It's downloaded. Let's do an ls. Yes, there it is. And DNF install Google Chrome. Yes, let's install Google Chrome. Let's give it a moment. So Google Chrome, I think, takes more time to install than the actual web service package. Fun fact. Just to prove a point that web services are relatively lightweight when it comes to Zabbix components and don't really make a performance impact of pretty much any kind. Okay, so let's wait for Chrome to get installed. Would you please post the command here? Yes, sure. This will be for for the RPM package, but I'll post it in the chat. Yes. There you go. So this is with curl, the RPM package, and you can do a similar. Don't have the deb commands on me right now, but if you just need to download, it's the same command. You just need to replace the RPM link with the deb package, and that's it. So you see in the middle, I have an RPM link. Just find the deb package and replace it that way. And also in the output, yeah, replace the output name with the .deb package name. Someone says that it froze for them. I'm right now, so I'm not doing really anything on the screen. I was checking the chat. Back okay now. Okay, thank you. All right, so some of you guys are still downloading. I'll switch back to slides. So we have downloaded Google Chrome, have installed Google Chrome. We have installed the reporting services, check the configuration. And what we're going to do next, we have our components installed. We will check the Zabbix server configuration. And there we need to make some adjustments because by default, in the default Zabbix server configuration, the components, the processes required for reporting services to work, they are not supported. They are not enabled. They are supported, but they aren't enabled. So we will need to enable the reporting managers, if I'm not mistaken. That's what they're called. Either workers or managers, can't recall. So what we're going to do, we're going to reporting writers. That was it. Going to open the etc Zabbix zabbixserver.conf, and we will check that we have some report writers started. And here you can see that by default, right, the default value is 0. So if your reports aren't working, I think in the front end, if you try to generate a report without any report writers getting started, you'll explicitly see an error message. No report writers are started, or something similar to that. So then make sure that you specify start report writers. The default value is 3, and there really isn't like a good calculation or a good logic on how you could define it. Usually 3 will be very much sufficient. It depends how long it takes to generate a report and how many reports you are generating. If you're generating reports, maybe, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 times a day, then you'll probably need to raise it, especially if those reports are generated at the same time, the same hour, the same minute. But I've been generating weekly reports with 3 report writers, and I've been doing just fine. No issues whatsoever. The video will be available, yes, online on YouTube in a few days. I think beginning of next week is the latest. Okay, so we will start report writers. We will also provide, and this is also an empty value by default, the web service URL, which is the URL on which our web service runs. So remember, we specified the port on which the web service URL was running. It was 10053, the default value. So we need to specify the address, the port, and then /report. And that will be it for Zabbix server. Then, of course, we'll have to restart it, right, to apply these changes. So let's do just that. I will use vi etc Zabbix server.conf, right? Here you can see, let me know if you require me to zoom in. I'll maybe zoom in a bit so you can see it better. Where we will get this documentation for the reference in the future. Slides will also be shared. If you're talking about slides, they will be available most likely on the workshops page and probably also linked in the video description. So yeah, slides will be available, and there's also Zabbix documentation that covers these configuration steps, the official Zabbix documentation. So let's open the Zabbix server config file. And I will just, yeah, it's already open. Okay, I had opened it before, so the file was cached. Don't mind this. That was just before I hadn't gracefully closed the text editor. So let's look for report. I think if we look for report, it should, yeah, start report writers. So search for report, it'll put you on start report writers. And then, so we need to add some writers. Right now we have 0, start report writers equals 3, right? And then right down under web service URL, we need to provide the web service URL, web service URL, and that will be, let me see, 127.0.0.1. So it's running on the same machine, 10053/report. Think like this. Okay. All right. So start report writers and web service URL. Double check for uppercase, lowercase letters. It's sensitive to it, right? So make sure that your upper lowercase spelling is correct, and then we can save it. And then we need to restart the Zabbix server. systemctl restart Zabbix server. Let's see. Seems like it restarted. I will do a tail of Zabbix server logs just to make sure. Right, looks good. I can also see over here one of the report writer processes has started successfully. If you misconfigure something, if you make a typo or something like that, the Zabbix server simply won't start up. Okay, so time macro is supported in the subject. Okay, we can actually try this. I'll be doing tests if everything goes right, and then we can test out the time macro. Is there any difference between standalone and HA server configuration? If I'm not mistaken, I haven't actually tried it out myself, but the only difference should be when we look at the allowed IP address in the web reports, right? Zabbix web service.conf over here, and we have allowed IP. Let's see over here. Does it mention anything about HA? Well, looks like it doesn't mention anything about HA here, so you'll simply have to, I assume, double check the documentation, but I assume you'll simply have to provide IP addresses of all of your HA nodes over here in the allowed IP, and that's it if you're running Zabbix server nodes in HA. Good question. I haven't actually checked myself, but I'm pretty sure that that's it, because over here it doesn't say anything about special syntax. So similar to how passive agent works, just comma separated addresses of the HA nodes. Okay, so yeah, the time macro we'll test when we're generating our reports. We'll see if it works for me. Okay, so we have configured the Zabbix server, have configured the Zabbix web report service. All right, we have installed Google Chrome. Don't forget to do that. Okay, now let's look at what else we need to do. So once you do it a single time, you can actually do it quite quickly, just that the first time takes a while, right? But if you prepare your commands, if you do this once, you can repeat this easily. So next up, we will switch to our front end. And what we're going to do, one important part of the configuration that can be very, very tricky is the front end URL and administration general other. So we need to provide the front end URL. This will be passed to the reporting service, this URL, because reporting service needs to be able to communicate with the front end also. So we specify the URL and then /Zabbix if this is where your Zabbix web front end is located. Mine is located under /Zabbix directory. So that's where it is. And I specified here, and I should be good to go. But be careful. If you make a typo here, you could see all kinds of different things. You could see an error message when you're generating a report about front-end URL, or when you're updating this page actually, about front-end URL being incorrect. But if syntactically the front-end URL is correct, but it's simply wrong. For example, instead of Zabbix, you specify Zabbix with 2 X's, or you forget the slash in the end. I think that also does it. You will simply receive blank reports. And that can be really confusing. So that's something that you have to double check, this here front-end URL. Then we will also check our media types. I have my email server configured there. So I'll give you some time to plug in yours if you're using, or if you can use Gmail as an email server if you have a Gmail mailbox. And then we will, so here is an example of the media type configuration. And then we will also test the media type. We will also, once the media type is created, need to add a media of this type. And reports work with email media types. We will need to add email media to our user that will be receiving the reports, right? And provide the email address of the user there. So let's get to it. Give me a second. I'll bring up my front end. So give me a moment here. Just need to move a tab over here. Okay, so let me zoom in a bit so you can see it better. And let's navigate to administration, general, other, right? And let's see HTTP 127.0.0.1 right /Zabbix. Think that's almost made a typo. I think that should be correct. You can look at the slides. If it's located on the same machine under Zabbix directory, that's what it should look like. Okay, looks correct. Let's update. And once we have done this, so administration, general, other, provide the front-end URL. After you have done that, navigate to your media types and find your email or email HTML. Both should do the trick. Media type, or you can also create a new media type of type email. This is what matters. And you need to configure the SMTP, so the email server configuration here. And then you can also click test in the previous page to test it. So email, you can click test here, right? And then you will then be able to test it. I have already pre-configured my email media type just so I don't have to mess around with generating passwords, one-time passwords in Gmail and things like that. I'm using Gmail, like I said. And if you Google, for example, Zabbix Gmail, it should be easy to figure out how to do it, or just add Gmail as SMTP server or SMTP server relay. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to do this, to configure the front end. Once again, administration, general, other front end URL over here. That's the only thing that we need. And then the media type. Under media types, so we can use the pre-configured email media types, or we can click create a media type, select email, and then populate them, and then test them. Let's see if I click test. Let me try and maybe send a test message to my email. This is a one-time email. I'll probably be deleting this account, so let me see if I did receive it. Yeah, I have received it. I have received it. How could I show you it without, yeah. So this is a test message from Zabbix. I just received it, right? There we go. Still using my my main account as the mail relay, unfortunately, and I didn't want to show it to you just for my own sanity's sake, not to get spammed. So that's why I kind of zoomed in on the message. But yes, I received it. Everything's working successfully. Good. Then we also need to navigate to administration users. All right, here I have this here user. This is our manager that'll be receiving reports. You can have multiple users, each receiving a different report. But for the sake of simplicity, I have this single user, Elise Houghton or Houghton, I'm not sure. It was a name generator that generated this. And if I click on the user in the media tab over here, I will see right that this is their email. There it is. I also, of course, need to make sure that they have permissions. So this user is of role Zabbix admin, and they belong to the managers group. And I also need to make sure that this manager user group has permissions to the hosts for which I wish to receive the reports on, right? If I'm trying to generate a report for hosts for which this user doesn't have any permissions, and I'm generating them by this user, then I won't receive the data that I won't see the data that I need to see. So permissions are also important. Okay. So I have received the test report. Everything seems working. Let's see. Next up. Next up, we can actually take a look at our dashboards. So next part is the fun part, right? So we have a couple of new widgets in Zabbix 6.0 LTS. And a few of them, specifically top hosts and SLA reports, I think, can be extremely useful in delivering new value by using Zabbix reports. And you will see how in a moment. We also have the graph widget. We also have the single item widget. And any other widget can be used without any restriction to provide information in reports. When we're using widgets like top host widget or single item widget, they will obtain information from your items. All right, so depending on which items you have properly configured, that information you can receive in your reports. And what if we wish to receive aggregated information? What if I wish to receive my weekly average traffic on an interface, or weekly average between all of the interfaces on a host, right? Let's say I'm a managed service provider. I wish to receive the weekly report for all of the customers' interfaces, their average incoming, outgoing traffic. So I will have to first create items for it, right? I will have to create items, and most likely those will be items of type calculated item that will use aggregate functions to aggregate the traffic information. For my example, I use traffic, and then calculate average traffic over, let's say, a week or the day or something like that. Either per interface or per all interfaces. I have examples for both. Or I can use more simple functions. For example, just do a sum of weekly transactions on our online store website, for example, and much more. Those functions are really, really flexible. What I'm touching here is just the visible part of the iceberg. I'll have 2 examples or 3, but you can do miracles with these functions. You just need to dive deep and explore a bit. There are tons of them in our documentation page. If you just Google Zabbix functions, you'll find the page. You'll see there are tons of them. So some examples. So transactions over the last 7 days. And if I'm receiving a report with this on, say, Monday, and that'll be the transactions for previous week. Average incoming traffic on an interface. So this is for a single interface, which is fine if we know which interface we wish to calculate this for. Average for ENP0S3. That's the interface name over the past 7 days. That's simple, but what if I wish to aggregate traffic across all interfaces on a host, right? That's the bottom example. So I am using average for each. This means I'm averaging each incoming traffic item on a host, right? The first 2 slashes mean that I'm doing this on the host on which this item is deployed. That's what the first 2 slashes are for. They can contain a host name, they can contain a wildcard, but if they contain neither, so nothing, that means this applies to the host on which this item is deployed on from a template, for example. And I will be getting an array of averages on each of the net if in, and then wildcard stands for, I'll be grabbing all interfaces because wildcard will contain interface names in the parameters. And then the average before the brackets means that I'll be getting the average out of averages, right? Out of all of the average values per each interface for the last 7 days, I will be averaging them out, and I'll be that way getting average incoming traffic for my customer. And average, once again, is just one of the examples. There are many functions, same as average for each is just one example of a for each function. There are many of them, and you can achieve this and much, much more with these. And this was impossible before 5.4, if I'm not mistaken, when we introduced the new syntax, right? If you had low-level discovery that was discovering new interfaces all the time, this was extremely problematic because you couldn't just pop in a wildcard over here. But now we can. And what we can do with this information reports-wise, We can then create widgets and graphs for our reports. For example, here I have top weekly traffic. This is my top widget with the default view. It has 3 views. It has the indicator, the bar, and the default view. So over here on the left side, I'm getting top weekly traffic on a single interface. And on the right side, I'm getting top weekly traffic on all interfaces for a host, right? And then I'm getting top weekly traffic on all interfaces on my mail server, on my Docker node, on Apache web server, and I'm doing this for both incoming and outgoing traffic. You can see there are differences in the values on the right side and on the left side. And then I'm also just adding graphs just so I can see the peaks and valleys of my usage over the past week. All right, let me take a look at the Q&A section. Okay, still, yeah, we'll test the timeout. Don't worry. And let's take a look at what dashboards I have before we move on. Actually, right? You can test this out with your default dashboards because configuring these it takes a lot of time. We don't have that much time right now, but you can just plug in some graphs on your instance. If you have an instance that you've been using for a while, just try and generate a report based on the dashboards that you have. And it's a new instance, then you can just try and generate the reports based on your default dashboard. You have these slides available and you'll be able to test this out and much more yourselves. So let me show you my front end. Once again, let's go to dashboards. Right. So I have 2 of them specifically prepared for this workshop. One is the one that you signed the screenshot. So I have zoomed it in a bit. That's how it looks like over the past 7 days. So I deployed this machine. It's not yet 7 days since I deployed it, but I can see that I have graphs starting from the 19th of, what is the month now? February, right? Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'll receive in my report. And then the top traffic for the past 7 days on all interfaces and on a single interface. And then also I have another dashboard, which is the SLA dashboard. Once again, this is nice because previously, first off, SLAs were much more limited in their functionality and had a lot less approaches when it comes to calculating service availability. Now they have some advanced logic when it comes to calculating service availability. And now you can display the SLA on your dashboards, right? So here I have 4 services. I can see their SLAs. Once again, in the weeks where the SLA wasn't configured, I'm seeing NA, so not available. But for the past 2 weeks, looks like my services have been available 100%. No problems on my hosts. And sum of weekly store transactions. This is a single item widget over here, right? Single, it's called item value, but we also refer to it as a single item widget. And it displays a single item value. And I am using a sum of weekly store transactions on Apache web server. We can look at it. If we navigate to configuration hosts, let me see, that's on Apache web server, Apache web server. Let's take a look at transactions, sum of weekly store transactions. There it is. It's a calculated item. Really simple. Some transactions over the last 7 days. What widget type for the top traffic stuff? Let me check. It's called top hosts. I'll show you. Top weekly traffic. There we go. So top hosts. It's a new widget in 6.0. Right, top hosts, and you can select to display top hosts sorted by a value. Bottom hosts, can move these things around over here. Right, what would you call them? The columns. Yeah, you can move them around. Which column is first? Which column is second? You can add different columns. You can specify the type of how the value is going to be displayed as a bar, as an indicator, as is. Currently, I'm using as is, and also the colors and so on. Everything is customizable here, right? Okay, so I'll give you guys a second. Okay. Then next up, So that's answered. Next up, let's try and generate a report, right? So we have looked at our dashboards. Let me see, where did my slides go? Where did my slides go? Those aren't, yeah, those are probably here. Let me hold on a second. There they are. So next up, creating and testing these scheduled reports. So we have configured everything, dashboards, items. Now we need to navigate to report scheduled reports, create a report based on a dashboard, enter the report name, select the dashboard, select the period, cycle, start, end dates, subjects and messages, descriptions, recipients, and also who will be generating the report. And then we can receive it, right? And we can also test it right here. So let's do that. That's our last step. And here we can play around a bit. So let's see if we are able to successfully generate a report. If I haven't missed anything, I should be able to do so. Reports, scheduled reports, create report. So let's give it a name. Let's say top traffic report, right? Then we'll select my dashboard, top weekly traffic. It'll be weekly report for the data in the previous week, generated on, let's say, Monday only. I won't submit a start date and end date. It'll be generated indefinitely, starting whenever next Monday comes. Let's first try a simple subject, and then we can play around with the time macro. All right, so let's say first one will be top host traffic report. And here we can just type in top host traffic report, traffic weekly report, let's say. A bit redundant, but fine. I will, in the subscriptions, remove admin, and I will add my manager user. So E. Hooten. And this report will be generated, let's say, by her recipient. And yeah, that's it. We will include her in the recipients. Okay, and now let's see if we can actually test this. Let's see, let's click test. Let's see what happens. Okay, report generated successfully. When you're testing your report generation, do take into account that I'm pretty sure that it will use the email address of the user that is clicking the test button, right? So you have to be careful about this. If you're logged in as admin, it will use your admin email address when you click test. So we have a question. These reports seem to be based on global dashboards. Yes. Is it possible to send host level dashboards, or would we need to rebuild a global one specific to a host? You would need to, build the dashboard specific to a host in that case. Yeah, unfortunately, that would be so. Currently, they're based only on dashboards with more things to come in the future when it comes to widgets and so on. But right now, you have to tailor it for a specific host or a list of hosts. Maybe you can just filter your widgets to include a specific set of hosts that you require, and then generate a report that way. All right. Why can't the time period be the current day? Let's see. What do you? Oh, you mean I guess repeat on, right, over here or something like that. It can be current day. Today is Thursday. I think it's Thursday, right? We can specify Thursday start date. That is sometime later today, and it will generate it today. No problem. Or we can do it daily and just specify the start time that's ahead of what is currently. So let's say currently it's 3:44 p.m. in where I'm from. And if I specify that it's a daily report or a weekly report sent out on Thursday at 4 p.m., it will then send it today at 4 p.m. and then the next day or the next Thursday, depending on how I have configured it. Or do you mean maybe like this, the period? Probably you mean the period, right? The data will be right. Okay, you mean the period. Yeah, it makes sense. That's something that's lacking, I guess. Yeah, it's based on previous values. I guess the assumption here from the design decision was that today's data is still incomplete and will contain many gaps because the day is not over most likely. And if you're sending it at the end of the day, then you might as well do it, for the previous day, right after midnight. So I think that's the reason. I hope that answers it. So yeah, for current day, there is no feature like that. I misunderstood. I thought you meant the cycle, not the period. Can the SLA be 100% with excused downtime? Yes. We, I think, will have or did have already checked the workshops page, a workshop about business service monitoring. I don't remember the schedule by heart. We will cover SLAs and business service monitoring in more detail, but yes, SLAs can have their uptimes, so it can be calculated only for a specific uptime only, and they can have their downtimes. So downtime will be excluded from SLA calculation, and much, much more. This isn't based on Zabbix maintenance periods. It's a separate configuration for the SLAs themselves. So we now have a new services section, right, where you can talk about, where you can configure these SLAs and see how they work. Let's see if I have received my test report. Looks like I have. Let me show it to you guys. It's a PDF file. Let me download the PDF and I'm going to open it on the screen. So let's see. So there's my report for previous week. Like I said, it's incomplete, right? Because I didn't start monitoring from the beginning of the week. That's why the graphs just contain, and the week also isn't the previous week is over, but yeah, I didn't monitor for the whole previous week. Here we can see the data that was aggregated for the previous week, right? And that's that way with these aggregate items and these new widgets, we can get a lot out of it. We can also try and generate a second report, but first let's play around with the time macro, as someone asked before, and let's see what we get with the time macro. So let's see, top host traffic report generated on date, and let's use date here, right? I think you also said that you have issues with date at time. Something like this. And let's test it. And let's see what I will get. Give me. Looks like they aren't resolving. And you know what? I think it could be a problem with the test. It could be that they're not resolving during the test, right? During when we click test. Feel free to let me know in the Q&A section if it's the same case for you, if you're simply performing tests with these macros, not, just waiting for them to get sent, for the reports to get sent at a specific point in time, but just clicking test, because that could be a test issue. Let me check the Q&A section real quick. Yeah, try just configuring a report for a few minutes in the future, and I think then it should resolve everything fine. I think it's a test issue. Yeah. And we will deploy a second report just to sort of solidify what we discussed here. We will deploy the SLA report based on the SLA dashboard. So I forgot to add this one. That's good on me. I forgot to click add. I clicked back to reports. Maybe we need a warning there, but let's configure a second one, right? And then I'll reconfigure the one that I just missed. So SLA report weekly. It will be based on, let's see, customer online store SLA dashboard, previous week, weekly generated on Monday. Let's say weekly SLA report on or for date. And in message, we'll also provide weekly SLA report. Okay, we'll once again send it to our manager. Add it. Let's test it. And then let's not forget to click add at the end, because I did forget it a moment ago. Let me see if I'm able to get it. I have received it. Let me download it real quick. And then I'll share it with you on the screen. Okay, So there we go. That's the SLA report. Looks bad because I have this here sidebar. But yeah, I'm getting my SLA information. I'm getting my problem report that was active at the time of the problem report generation. And I'm getting the sum of weekly stored transactions that were generated at the time of the report generation. Okay. And let's add this. Let's not forget to add it. There we go. And I will also recreate the previous one, which was a top network hosts weekly report. Top weekly traffic, top weekly, yeah, top host by traffic. Let's name it that way. Traffic. Weekly, previous week, generated on Monday. Let's say I want to receive it from today until February next year, right? 24th next year. Maybe after a year, I'll change some things. Weekly traffic report generated on date. We can leave the message empty. This time, what we can do, okay, let's set the recipient to Elise. I will generate this report by admin. No, let's generate it by Elise. I think the first one was generated by admin. And we can provide a brief description. Weekly traffic report based on top weekly traffic dashboard. And let's add it. We know that it works already. And that's pretty much that. We have our reports working. No error messages. Testing is good because if you test, we can also, what we can do is we can try and break something if you wish. I said that this will last for about an hour. You can try and break things. The aspect ratio is not good. If I'm not mistaken, the aspect ratio gets adjusted also depending on the dashboard, right? So if I let's try and change things. Let me update this report. Let's test. Let's play around. Let's say let's delete these, right? And let's see how it looks like if I just leave it like this. Let's see if the aspect ratio changes, right? Let's see if it looks better. Okay, report has been updated. This is not report, but dashboard has been updated. Therefore, report also has been updated because it's based on this dashboard. Let's try and test it. Okay, let's see how it looks right now. Yeah, it actually sort of looks. Let's compare. Let's see, right? Yeah, it contains these gray areas still from the looks of it. So the aspect ratio, I think, is somewhat hard coded. At least I don't think that there is then a way to change it necessarily. But once again, I think it's sort of defining an aspect ratio of reports could be a separate feature request that you could specify and we could look at. Right. So once again, let me take a look at the dashboard. Can't really do much else about it. Yeah, it is the way it is. Even if I put these here on the very left side and then generate a test report, scheduled reports, test it. Let's do a test and let's see. I think it's going to be the same aspect ratio is going just to be located on the very left side. Yeah, that looks like it. Let me open it up. So yeah, there you go. Looks the same, right? Let's open the previous one. Right, they look the same. Yeah. The same aspect ratio. Doesn't really matter how the widgets are placed. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I see we discover many potential feature requests when we sort of do these workshops and webinars and we answer your questions. If it's the dashboard is longer, right, the report will just be stretched out, expanded vertically. And yes, spam filters could block the report email, yeah, same as with general notification emails and things like that. So do check your mailbox. Yeah, thank you for the comment. Time working, date not working. Okay, so that's something. We received in a Q&A a comment that if we do the reporting as per schedule instead of testing, the time works, the date doesn't work. Let's open Zabbix documentation page, Zabbix macros, right? That should be, I'll show it in a moment. I'll pull it up in a moment on the screen. Supported macros, right? That should be 6.0. Those of you who maybe haven't played around with the documentation page, it has also received an update. Now we have a nice search functionality. Let's look for date. Internal notification. Okay, and what about time? Let's search for time. Okay, I'm gonna just do it this way, time. Trigger-based notifications commands, problem update, service-based discovery, auto-registration, internal notifications. Not sure, not really anything mentioned about reports, at least I'm not seeing. Let's, yeah. So maybe it's expected, maybe it's not. I would check. I'll check. I suggest check the bug tracker. I'll check it myself afterwards. If there is a bug about it, then there it is. If there isn't, maybe try and create a bug report. Config reports, there it is, right? Thank you. So here it's only time, but we should also, let's see, time. Yeah, it looks like data isn't supported, but that's a good catch because we have to update our macros by location also. So thank you. It should be specified also here because for me, this is the first place where I look. Macros by location. This section is extremely useful and it should be provided over here. Any way to include internal CA certificates? I see we can ignore them all together. Could you elaborate on this? Do you mean like CA certificate monitoring, or what exactly do you mean by it? What are the major features in the reporting part that Zabbix has added in 6.0 LTS version that was not available in previous versions? What I discussed here, pretty much all of the visualization functionality that we discussed today, top hosts widgets, SLA widgets, that's completely new. So that not only helps with visualization, but can also be used in reporting. So more flexibility when it comes to what can be reported. And also, of course, this is where the new functions are used for aggregations, calculations, and so on. Okay. Okay, let me check the comments more. Can the mail dispatch be viewed in the dashboard in a similar way to the action log? I'm pretty sure that it cannot. No, it will be logged in the, let's see. It will be audit log potentially. Let's see if it's in the audit log because we have made some changes there. Let me move back to my front end. Let's see if we can see it in audit log. Cluster node, what's this? Some updates. Last 5 minutes. So it looks like this is, we have some LLD updates happening. And that looks like, let's say 15 minutes. Let's see. Resource, do we have a scheduled report? So at the very least, we can see changes made to the scheduled reports. So 11:06. Okay. Looks like my time is a bit off on this machine. Not sure if we currently can see the reports being sent out themselves. over here. But we can see changes made to these scheduled reports. When testing, aggregate cannot connect to web service. Cannot connect to the web service URL using bad, illegal format or missing URL. Cannot connect to web service. Let's see. Let's check first. Let's check the Zabbix server config file. Report. Come on, report. Let's check the web service URL over here in the Zabbix server config file. Let's see if I maybe, so your message says cannot connect to web service URL using bad or illegal format or missing URL. What if I break it? Let's check. Let's see, will it work? Let me check Zabbix server log. Okay, looks like it started. Oh, you don't have it set. Okay, but I just broke mine. Let's just see what happens, right? Promised you I'd break some things. So there we go. Let's test it. Cannot resolve host name. And that's what it says in my case. But yeah, you then probably had sort of the same things. Thank you for the comments in the Q&A. Thank you. So yeah, when you're testing, the error message will be self-explanatory. If you have a wrong host name, it will give you could not resolve host name, and it references to, oh, come on. Let's see, yes, should have probably deleted the swapped file. It refers to the wrong URL in the web service URL, right? Of course, it treats this as a host name and it cannot resolve it. Okay, let me see. We have a comment in the chat about insecure URLs. Hold on a second. Let me open it. And let's see. Option to ignore. Okay, so it's something to do, yeah, when you're using SSL. Local CA not installed in a Linux box, the reporting will not work. This should be fixed in 6.0. Based on what I'm seeing on the fixed versions, so I'm logged out. I can probably show it. No confidential information here. So fixed version, it's fixed in 6.0. So that shouldn't be an issue anymore. So I would suggest deploy Zabbix appliance, 6.0 appliance, or just deploy 6.0 in a container or a small VM and test it out. Should be good to go. All right, so we broke things. Let's fix them. Report. Then 10053/report. Let's save it. After making changes, restart the Zabbix server. Check the log after the restart. Okay, and our reports should be good to go now. Right, if I click test now, there we go. Everything works. All right. I think we have covered most of it. So the takeaway should be, if you're running Zabbix 6.0, based on the visualization options that we have right now, have many new things that you can report on. Don't be afraid to take a look at aggregate functions, take a look at calculated functions used for calculation, for each functions that can essentially obtain an array of values and you can then aggregate on them. The new widgets, top widget has many different views, can provide different information, is highly customizable. Our graphs here, the SLA widget available on my SLA dashboard, right? That's also useful together with business service monitoring. And that way you can report this information and get many new insights by using the Zabbix reports. So if we have no more questions, this recording will be available in the next few days. The slides that I was covering will also be available. And before we finish, I'd like to talk about one last thing. Our training. So if you wish to get more hands-on experience, not just with reports, but with the new widgets, right? The new trigger functions, the new syntax is extremely flexible. That's what we have these courses here for, from certified user, where you will learn the graphical user interface of Zabbix, right? And you'll be able to just learn how to monitor and how to react on dashboards and things like that, useful for NOC teams, to specialist and professional, where you will learn how to deploy Zabbix in a complex, medium to large sized environment with proxies, with Docker containers, with, for example, complex triggers, right? Flexible triggers, anomaly detection, things like that, to expert, where you will learn ins and outs of Zabbix, what these different processes mean, right? We configured writers today, but there are also pollers, there are history syncers, there are many of them, and each of them has their own internal workflow. And you can learn all of this in our courses. If you wish something smaller, right? So these courses range from 1 day to 5 days. If you wish something smaller, then we have 1-day courses focused on a specific use case. If you wish to learn how to integrate Zabbix with your solutions, that's what the automation and integration with Zabbix API is for. If you wish to learn how to transform data that you receive, which can also be useful in integrations, we have pre-processing. We had some questions about security today, right? About the SLA certificates and maybe some issues that report service had before. So all of these security questions, from Vault to encryption to the new password policies, covered in the security course. And what I talked about, the advanced problem detection, which can be very useful, as you saw on our dashboards and reports, is also covered in a separate 1-day course. So if you wish to obtain some extra insights into these topics, and maybe also wish something a bit more bite-sized, rather than spending 3 or 5 days in a course, maybe that's just too expensive or too much for you, then these 1-day courses are here for you. So flexibility, spend from 3 to 5 days and become a Zabbix specialist, then professional, then expert, or 1 day and get insights on a particular topic and then use it in your environment. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for the questions. I hope this was useful. I hope you were able to follow. If not, once again, recordings will be available on YouTube, right? And you'll be able to write your questions also over there in the YouTube comments section. I try to respond when I have free time there. So yeah, if you forgot to ask something, you can ask there. And we have more workshops coming. We have more workshops later today. We have some workshops tomorrow. The next workshop that's starting in an hour, if I'm not mistaken, will be covering baseline monitoring and anomaly detection. So go ahead and check that out. Hopefully I'm not wrong about the topic. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys around our webinars, workshops, trainings, and have a great day. Have a great evening or morning or whatever the time is there. And I'll see you guys around. Thank you.